show is the author and photographer of Everyone's Welcome and Allergen-Free Desserts cookbooks. Amanda is a leader within the food allergy community, sharing new ideas and thoughtful perspectives. Her goal is to inspire confidence in her readers. She has a mindful and holistic approach to managing food allergies with confidence, connecting food, body, and mind, sharing bright and bountiful recipes while using whole food ingredients inspires her readers to be creative with the food they can have instead of focusing on what is off limits. Anxiety and the emotional side of living with food allergy is another one of her big focuses. Amanda often shares her own personal experiences and strategies for managing food and allergic reaction anxiety and PTSD.
What made you decide to go into food allergy management?
I think for me, I had left my job in the corporate world and I had sort of tried my hand at having a business and it wasn't really sustainable. And I ended up moving on to something else. And ultimately, I always kept coming back around to my food allergy blog and blogging about my life as an adult living with food allergies. And I just decided to really lean into that because obviously that was something that I had this unique experience in and that other people were relating to and were interested in. And I just always kept coming back to that topic, no matter what I tried to do with my career. So I ended up just really leaning into it and deciding to become an advocate for awareness for the food allergy community and working on my book. And it kind of all just unfolded from there.
It's amazing. You're doing great work.
Thanks.
How did you decide to get into the teen and adult population versus children or the elderly?
Well, when I was growing up, food allergy was not super common. There was, a couple other kids in my school who had food allergy. One of them was my brother. Like it wasn't really a common thing. And so I didn't really meet a lot of other people who had food allergy until I was much older. And when I was in my, I want to say my mid 20s, I started connecting with other adults who had food allergy, but I don't have any kids. So for me, I was always just writing about my own experiences. And at the time I started writing, I was like around 21, 22. Like those were my experiences at the time. And then I connected with a couple other allergy adults who were writing about their experiences and connecting over things like I had a business trip to Germany and I wanted to know how they handled food allergies in Germany. And then I found another blogger who was writing about her experience and she lived in Germany. And so we just sort of like started connecting that way. But because I don't have kids, I just wasn't really able to write about that experience authentically. So sometimes I'd write sort of reflection posts like, oh, this is how we did it when I was a kid, or these are the experiences or the thoughts that I had. But I was always more interested in writing about my present experiences. And that's why it was all more teen and adult centered.
Right. That makes sense. And then also, the teen and adult population, also kids, but the teen and adult population, I think is really, really I won't say more critical, but is very important. I think the prevalence of food allergies is really 100%, there than necessarily like working with the elderly or even, children, but,
it's also what I would consider in some ways a bit more vulnerable when you're comparing the teen and adult population to kids, especially teenagers, because when you're a kid with food allergy, generally you have some kind of caregiver, parent, or guardian who's helping guide you through that process. And so you're not really alone in it. But when you move into your teen years, that's when you're just thrust into this independent management of your food allergies. And like when I moved away to university, I didn't have a parent that I could rely on every time I was going to a restaurant or buying a new product or grocery shopping or whatever. So you're in this situation where you really have to just all of a sudden take on 100% of the burden of managing your food allergy. And that's where sometimes accidents happen because there's a learning curve and you might not understand the importance of taking your EpiPen all the time because maybe your mom always had one in her purse, and suddenly now it's all up to you. So for me, I really want to get that young adult audience and stress to them that I know this is the age where like it's not cool to have something different, but you really got to be on this because it's so important.
Yeah, no. Do you mind, I guess, maybe elaborating a little bit about your experiences with your brother with a food allergy and then also yours? And if you don't feel comfortable, that's okay too.
No, that's okay. So my brother and I actually have different food allergies. So we do have some crossover, but then we also have some different allergens. So I did grow up with having my allergens in my home because my mom didn't want to, like my parents didn't want to deprive my brother and I each of each other's allergens. So we kind of just had like a management system to have everything in our home and have it be safe. But his allergies, I would say, are much more common. Like nut allergy and peanut allergy, most people are somewhat familiar with. And I don't want to make a blanket statement and say that it's easier in any way because that's not really the case. But I find he grew up with less anxiety about it. And my allergies, I have a longer list. And I think I do have more anxiety about my food allergies. And I had more of a desire to really hide it when I was a kid and a teenager. So our experiences, although we both had food allergies and grew up in the same home, our experiences were actually really different. And we had a very different mindset towards it. And it also might be because I've had many more anaphylactic reactions. So there's like the PTSD element of, when you have something traumatic happen to you so many times when you're a kid, it just doesn't really ever go away.
Right. And how have you, and I'm sorry, these are just, I'm deviating a little bit from our questions, but how did you manage, or how have you managed your, anaphylactic like reactions and so forth?
Well, most of them happened when I was pretty young.
Okay.
Yeah, most of them happened before the age of 13, I would say. So usually I was home with my parents, but then I had one when I was in high school and one when I was 25, where fortunately I was actually home with my brother and he had the joy of giving me the EpiPen, which I think was probably pretty scarring for him as well. And then, call an ambulance right away. Or in our case, we lived in Toronto. There's like a central, we call it Hospital Row, where like all the best hospitals in Canada are right there on the main strip. And I used to live really close to that. So it was actually faster for me to just get there on my own as opposed to calling an ambulance. But trying to remain as calm as possible, even though it's impossible in that situation. And if you think you need the EpiPen, then, do it. Your body will tell you. Yeah.
Right. No, of course. Absolutely. I guess maybe explain to our audience what an anaphylactic reaction is to a food allergy. And I guess
an anaphylactic reaction. Yeah, an anaphylactic reaction is basically when your body goes into overdrive because something that it identifies as like a poison essentially enters your body. So everyone has their own list of allergens if you're a person with food allergy, and it's an immune disease. So it's very often confused with intolerance. So for example, I have a dairy allergy, which means that if I consume even the most minute amount of butter, for example, or milk, or an additive from dairy, then my body would go into anaphylactic shock, which is different than an intolerance, which is where you might have like, the symptoms could be severe, but it's not necessarily life-threatening. So an intolerance would be more like stomach issues or digestive issues, for example. Whereas anaphylactic, it is a life-threatening reaction. So your blood pressure rises and it can result in hives, nausea, vomiting, you can pass out, and then this can lead to really serious effects. And, it is a life-threatening reaction. So if you're experiencing that, you take the EpiPen, which is a shot of epinephrine, which essentially like jumpstarts your body and you can feel the effects of it pretty quickly. And that's the life-saving tool in the event of anaphylaxis. Yeah.
Yeah, no. I think that's really important for our audience to know, especially with those, parents that are just coming into fruition with, a child who has a food allergy. What are the 3 recipes that you like to share with your clients, or your top 3, I should say?
Oh, I don't know what my top 3 would be. I always say you have to know how to make a really good salad dressing, a really good pasta, and a really good baked good. So those would be like, the only one-on-one counseling that I do are cooking lessons. So if I'm working with a client and they're interested in learning like some basics, those are three areas that I would say you have to have one good recipe in each of those categories.
Right. No, of course. And so now, and those are three great options. Now, with a food allergy, there does come an emotional side to it. How do your clients, and how have you seen, you guys manage your emotional side of your food allergy? And what does that look like, I guess, if that makes sense?
Well, I don't actually work with any clients to help them manage their
Right. Okay. I'm sorry. I just meant generally. Sorry.
Yeah. But when I write about managing PTSD or the way that I do it in my own life,
right.
It's a long and complicated process, I think. I went to therapy for a while when I was younger, and I found that extremely helpful because there are a lot of things that you don't realize you're carrying with you necessarily until you actually talk it out with this impartial third person who can tell you, yeah, that's trauma, that's stress. And there were things that I had not really identified as traumatic. I had just thought oh, these are experiences that I've had in my life. And I didn't understand that they were actually weighing on me in a deeper emotional way. So sorting that out was extremely helpful for me. And I think therapists can play a really important role, especially if you have food anxiety. But it's an ongoing thing. I don't think there's ever a moment when I'm going to feel like I'm cured of my PTSD. But there are little things that I do in my daily life. Meditation is really important to me. I've been doing that for a long time now. And I just take a moment every day to just stop and be still and meditate. And I used to think it was just mumbo jumbo before I started doing it. And then now I'm like, oh, I understand why people do this. It's actually really effective. I used to stress about things that I worried were going to happen in the future. And in a way, it was kind of holding me back from doing the things that I wanted to do. So I adopted more of an approach of, taking things one moment at a time. Me worrying about something is not going to prevent it from happening. It's not going to, better equip me to deal with it if it happens. Right. So just sort of understanding how to find balance and how to manage caution and preparedness and not allowing that to develop into anxiety that holds me back from doing things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. So how did you decide to take your profession further into with becoming an author and photographer?
That was something that since I was a little kid, it was just a goal of mine and my family. I want to say it was just something we knew, oh, eventually Amanda's going to write a cookbook. It's something from the time I was a really little kid that I've always wanted to do with my life. And I've just always been really interested in cooking and photography, both of it. And I love performance, and I love presenting things. And so I got to kind of do that part of my role when I'm doing cooking classes or when I'm filming things. But then the cookbook aspect of it, that was just always a life goal of mine. So to have put out 2 cookbooks was just it's something that I had always set my sights on. And even though it wasn't what I went to school for or something that I studied, I was I just have to make this happen. So that's something that I've always wanted to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's great. I think your book and your photography, I think it's amazing. And I think when you have a passion, especially, since you were a child, I think it's great to, partake in it and really follow it if it becomes obviously, if it still is a passion for you, when you're an adult.
Yeah, definitely. Now I work with different food companies to create recipes for them and photography for them. And that to me is one of the most exciting parts of my job, because I'm just doing the thing that I love to do. And I'm just so lucky that gets to be my career now. And it's a complete shift from what I was doing before. But every morning that I wake up and I'm doing client work like that, I think this is fantastic. I'm so happy that I took this route.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so with your clients, do you manage or help them with a following a strict diet and counting calories, or, how do you, I guess, approach your clients a little bit more in depth, from what we discussed earlier?
I don't do like any nutritional counseling whatsoever with my clients. So it's really, for me, like I'm like the anti-diet person. So I don't really have any opinions on dieting. And I know that with food allergy, there's also a very fine line, because a lot of people with food allergy develop anxieties towards food that can lead to disordered eating. So when it comes to talking about diet and food allergy, it's just a zone that we don't really talk about in the food allergy community, because so many people have had, these poor experiences with dieting, myself included. So it's, for me, counting calories is like, it's not something I would ever encourage any of my cooking class clients to do, unless it was something that a nutritionist or a doctor or something told them to do. But what I focus on with my cooking classes is really just getting excited about food. And for so many people, it's difficult to find excitement in food because they're, nervous to try ingredients. They don't know what to buy. Maybe their family is new to the whole food allergy thing, and they're like, what do I cook if I can't make, the recipes that I grew up eating? They're at a wall, right? Like they need some inspiration. So what I do is really come in and just provide that excitement and like work with them to figure out, what do your kids like to eat? How can we make this more exciting? What color can we add to your plate? What ingredients are local to you? Like, how can we experiment with that? And it's more about like a creative outlet, I would say. A creative outlet to something delicious. That's what I aim for.
Right now. And of course, it's always, you always want something really good when when you're eating. And, with food allergies, obviously that can be very tricky.
It can, and a lot of families are used
dairy allergy.
Yeah, and a lot of families are used to like maybe going out to eat more often, or eating fast food, or eating at other people's homes, and then suddenly you get this food allergy diagnosis, and it's near impossible for a lot of people to eat outside of their home or to eat in a restaurant. So then they kind of have to learn to cook, and a lot of people just don't have experience. So it's nice to work with people and help them just create some really basic things, just so that they can get their hands wet and try something. That part's really exciting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then lastly, what type of advice would you give to others who have just been recently diagnosed with a food allergy or are suffering from a food allergy? And this can also include parents as well.
I would definitely say focus on the things that you can have, because when you're first diagnosed, it's very overwhelming. Maybe your kid could have multiple allergies, and they could be all the things that you used to love to eat. You never get to choose what the allergy is going to be. So focus on all the things that you can eat, and stay towards, I like to call like more the whole foods aisles. So stick to fresh things, stick to single like whole food ingredients. If you start walking down the packaged food aisles, especially if you have an allergy to like eggs, corn, soy, dairy, nuts, you're going to be very quickly discouraged, because nearly every packaged item has soy or dairy of some kind. So,
right.
Worry about that stuff later. Like first equip yourself with understanding how to cook really good quality whole food ingredients. And then once you have that under your belt, I think you'll feel like you have a lot more available to you. Then start worrying about the packaged stuff, but just focus on the positive at first.
I think that's great. Well, this was so great. I know this wasn't super long, but I think your information and your knowledge and your own experience is going to go a long way with our audience.
Thank you. I'm so glad to hear that. And thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. All righty. Thanks so much, Amanda.